You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Philip Eidson, and today is Friday, May the 12th, 2023.
6.
Did you know that there are now at least 37 podcasts covering the procurement space? I know, right? That's pretty crazy because back when we started AOP, there were only 2 podcasters in the space, John Hansen and our very own Kelly Barner. Now, at Art of Procurement, our long-standing belief has been that we see our fellow collaborators across procurement as friends, not competitors. We all do what we do because we're all passionate about the procurement community we serve and in doing our bit to elevate the profession. Well, fellow podcaster and friend of the show, James Meads, today published a post listing all 37 on his website, procurementsoftware.site. If you're interested, we'll link to his post in the show notes of today's episode.
5.
This week's AOP podcast featured one of my closest friends, Chris Riley. As well as being a groomsman at my wedding, Chris is a principal in supply chain and procurement at Deloitte Consulting, based in Perth, Australia. Now, Chris and I discussed how to drive a culture of operational excellence in procurement. In this clip, Chris was sharing the importance of getting a baseline of what procurement actually has to do on a day-to-day basis. What's taking up all of our time?
What am I working on? I've put all of these targets into the market around cost, around indigenous, around climate. What am I working on that's moving those agendas? And am I confident I can hit all of those targets? I don't think there's a way in most organizations to really understand the full package of work. Mm-hmm. We see many of the source to pay solutions, a pretty good mechanism to actually capture sourcing projects, albeit the clock starts ticking on the sourcing project from the day that the RFP got loaded in, not all the work that will run up to putting it in the first place. But again, I'd hypothesize that's only about 40% of the actual work and tasks that procurement folks do. So all of those other things that come out of SRM meetings, contract performance reviews, all the big ideas workshops that kind of come up with a lot of ideas, all the category risk assessments that have identified a risk and triggered an activity to go and solve said risk. None of that sort of sits in a way that can be sort of searchable and tracked. So what I'm really seeing is a need to bring all of that together into a consolidated view. In addition, we talked a bit offline again, this concept of an intake engine from the business. So when the business, a bit like IT, when my laptop's broken, I log my ticket on a ticketing tool. Procurement often doesn't have that mechanism to kind of log the demand. So all of that plumbing needs to be in place, centralized into a portfolio management sort of capability, so we can kind of see the work and then start to allocate it to the available resources. So I think that's step one, is get the visibility and the allocation. That would be a start. Then we can ask ourselves questions around run our start, stop, continue workshop. What should we do? What should we drop? What should we continue to do? I think that's the silver bullet.
4.
Every month, Chief Executive Magazine publishes a CEO Confidence Index as a barometer of the current challenges and opportunities on the mind of CEOs. Now, interestingly, in May 2023, the primary strategy for CEOs is actually cost containment, and that's by a large distance over the second strategy, which is hiring for growth and expansion. Interesting, cost containment is actually ranked as having 6 times the focus right now for CEOs of supply continuity. What a change that's been over the past few months. Now, this obviously continues to be a great opportunity for procurement. But today's tip really around this is that cost containment, as we've talked about a lot on the show, has to be done strategically and in collaboration with the rest of the business. Because one day, and probably one day sooner than later, that investing for growth is going to go back to the top of the list. And we want to continue to make sure that we as procurement retain relevance as soon as expansion returns to that number one strategy for a CEO.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Cyber attacks have been on the rise since 2020, occurring with increasing frequency and having a more detrimental impact to the companies affected. Cyber risk regularly tops C-level risk rankings as a high priority and a short-term concern. Now, almost 20% of data breaches are actually associated with third parties in a company's supply chain. And in this week's Dial P for Procurement podcast, Kelly tells the story of Expeditors International and how a 2022 cyber attack not only impacted them as a company, but it also led to a lawsuit brought by a customer, iRobot. Kelly explores what happened to Expeditors International of Washington and how the cyber attack impacted iRobot's business. Now, options available to companies to protect and mitigate cyber risk include cyber risk insurance, some specific internal safeguards, and there are also interesting ways for industries to come together when a cyber attack takes down one of their own. This case study acts as a fascinating call to action for procurement and asks if we really need to be doing more than just facilitating cybersecurity questionnaires.
2.
Last month, I interviewed Tim Nelson, CEO of Hope for Justice, to give procurement a call to action to help in the fight to eradicate modern-day slavery. We discussed how modern-day slavery is not just a problem in developing economies, it can be happening anywhere in your supply chain. And to that extent, this week the US Labor Department released photos of conditions faced by over 100 children following an investigation at a Nebraska-based meatpacking business. The story was also showcased by the 60 Minutes show on CBS here in the US and the UK's Guardian newspaper. Now, as part of that, the US Labor Department reported a 69% rise in illegal child labor in the US since 2018. So the question for procurement: do you know if suppliers in your supply chain are using illegal child labor?
1.
I'm excited to share that we're launching our very first virtual event focused solely on direct procurement in partnership with Caddy, Viridian, and Consus Global. AOP Direct, which is going to be on June the 13th, 2023, will explore 4 different strategies for maximizing procurement's impact. We'll contextualize the importance of supply discovery, savings through collaboration, something we talked about earlier in today's Procurement 6, supplier performance management, and direct tail spend optimization. As always, our virtual events like AOP Direct are free to join. You can register to join us on the day or sign up for access to all the videos on demand at artofprocurement.com/AOP Direct 23.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.